Hello and welcome to this new video on Hegel's text Who Thinks Abstractly. So last time we explained briefly what German idealism means, and then we talked about critical thinking, and we ended with some wariness about the meaning of critical thinking. We said that everyone promotes or advocates for critical thinking, but then since critical thinking is a kind of thinking that can only exist in opposition to abstract thinking, then it means that there has to be people who think abstractly while others think concretely or have an idea what concrete or critical thinking means. But if everyone is advocating for critical thinking, it would mean that, everyone claims to be a critical thinker or wants more critical thinking around, or at least, they know what critical thinking is. And so that would clash with what we just said, that, there are people who think abstractly while others think critically. So this led us to a question, well, who is thinking critically in all of this mess? How can we know who is a critical or a concrete thinker when everyone claims to be one, or when everyone claims to know what critical thinking is? And so Hegel already saw this problem back in his day. Hegel asks who thinks abstractly because he starts from the fact that everyone flees abstract thinking. But when everyone runs away from abstract thinking, then the question becomes, well, who is thinking abstractly? So we can divide the text into different parts. As you will see, there is a progression in Hegel's argument, which is excellent because this is how you need to argue in philosophy. First, you state the context in which you're going to state your problem. Like, no one talks in abstraction. Everyone wants to be. No one wants to talk in abstraction. Everyone wants to be taken seriously when talking. So everyone wants to talk concretely. Like, that's the main problem. So first step in argumenting philosophically is to state the common views on something. Like, here's how the common opinion thinks about a certain subject. The common opinion presents itself as concrete, right? How can an opinion be common or popular if it hasn't the sense of being concrete, of being about reality? If an opinion doesn't seem to be concrete, then it wouldn't be popular. So saying that abstraction is bad and is something to run away from certainly feels like a concrete opinion. It feels real, it feels like it is something that makes sense. The common opinion has proof for that statement. Metaphysics is just abstractions because, well, show me where metaphysics was useful in the history of the world, for example. Did anyone survive on metaphysics? Can you pay your bills or put food on the table with metaphysics? No. So metaphysics is an abstraction. It is completely removed from reality, and so my opinion about metaphysics being useless, well, that opinion is concrete. It is concrete because, well, we have proof of that opinion, and so this is made explicit in the text from the opening line, where Hegel states. He starts his essay with, "Think abstractly, sauf qui peut. Let those who can save themselves. Even now I can hear a traitor, bought by the enemy, exclaim these words denouncing this essay because it will painfully deal with metaphysics. For metaphysics is a word no less than abstract and almost thinking as well, from which everybody more or less runs away as from a man who has caught the plague." So already here we have an idea what abstract thinking can mean, and we surely can think of examples like these when we encounter people who think about philosophy, for example. I have met people who told me that philosophy is useless, that it is unproductive, like it's a waste of time, it is just verbal and intellectual masturbation, a bunch of abstractions that have no impact on real life, except wasting it away. So the meaning of an abstraction as presented here basically means a thought that is removed from reality. It's like when we say that some people have their heads in the clouds, for example. They're detached from the concrete, from what is real. When something is concrete, it means that it has form, it has solidity. You can touch it, see it, smell it, and once we are in contact with it, it is hard not to see it anymore, right? That's what makes an idea concrete. So concrete is also the name for the material we use to build strong and hard buildings, that we use to build, constructions that have solid foundations, that provide security and shelter and cannot break down easily. So the only thing that can break something that is concrete is something that is harder than concrete, so something more concrete than concrete. Abstractions, on the other hand, are like smog. They have no form, they have no shape, they cannot be experienced like concrete things. They're more like mental representations without any consistence. You cannot build anything on an abstraction. You cannot use abstractions to shape the world, because an abstraction is abstracted from the world. It literally means something that is drawn off. Okay, that's the literal meaning of an abstraction. It means something drawn off. So abstractions are dealing not with the real world, but with ideas. For example, this is why idealism got a pejorative connotation as well. It also means the belief that all that exists are ideas instead of real life events. An idealist in this sense is someone who keeps entertaining ideas in his mind from an ivory tower, cut off from the rest of the world, and is producing nothing helpful or substantive. He's like completely sterile, and what is more tragic, he doesn't seem to be aware of it. Like, he's always so confident and arrogant in his ideas that his behavior borders on the sociopathic. So a concrete example of this behavior would be the father who urges his son to get a good job and make money because that's how the real world works, but the son wants to play music with his band and promote hippie lifestyle ideas, for example, of living, living for the moment, or sharing and without wearing shoes. The son lives in his ideal world, which is nothing compared to how the world really works, how the real world really is. And so metaphysical concepts are often the first thing we think about when we are dealing with abstractions. As a matter of fact, an abstraction is a metaphysical concept. So if you have a philosopher who wrote a text on abstraction, well, everybody can see the metaphysical discourse coming from miles away, and so they run away from it like the plague. Because, well, the philosopher who is going to be talking about metaphysics, who's going to be talking about abstractions, is like, the kid who wants to live a hippie lifestyle while his father is urging him to get a real job and, to make something out of his life. Now, of course, as a philosopher, you are going to criticize that common opinion, right? Like, we just stated what is the common opinion, and now as a philosopher, we are going to criticize it. You're going to show that the common opinion is itself an abstraction, all right? That the common opinion claims that it is concrete, and so the philosopher's task is to show that in reality, the common opinion is not concrete. It is as abstract as the abstractions it claims to be against. So the next step in a philosophical argument is to show that you actually agree with the common view before you start criticizing it. Like, you are going to give it credit, that it is, that the common opinion is remarkable and it is a sign of good society, or as Hegel calls it, the beautiful world. In the next 2 paragraphs, for example, Hegel is going to be praising this beautiful world who is too smart for being fooled by abstract talk, and is too this beautiful world is too moral for Hegel to be as wicked as to fool this beautiful world. Hence, Hegel starts the next paragraph by claiming that his intention isn't to change the mind of the beautiful world about abstractions. Quote, But the intention here really is not so wicked as if the meaning of thinking and of abstract were to be explained here. There is nothing the beautiful world finds as intolerable as explanations. I too find it terrible when someone begins to explain, for when worst comes to worst, I understand everything myself. Here, the explanation of thinking and abstract would in any case be entirely superfluous, for it is only because the beautiful world knows what it means to be abstract that it runs away. So in other words, the beautiful world is too smart to need an explanation about abstractions because the beautiful world already knows what abstractions are. And even if they don't know, or at least they don't know it now, they'll come to understand an abstraction by themselves in due time. So really there is no point in explaining what is an abstraction. For the beautiful world, they are already knowledgeable. So this is in philosophy what we call the Socratic irony. Like Socrates always praises the common opinion only to deconstruct it afterwards to prove that the common opinion was itself an abstraction in disguise, blaming the concrete thinker of being abstract. Okay, so Hegel's text is even more ironic than the usual Socratic dialogue because here it is philosophy itself that is being accused of abstraction. But as with Socratic irony, Socrates was led to execution, and so Hegel is aware of the danger of irony as it runs the risk of humiliating the audience. This is something that Socrates always gets blamed for, that he humiliates his opponent by ironically, praising him and then, prove that the opponent had no idea what he was talking about, and well, the guy got killed for that. So Hegel is aware of this, and so when the audience realizes through the philosopher that they were the ones living in ignorance and abstraction, they can retaliate against him. So how does Hegel manages this problem with irony? Well, as we said, first Hegel goes along with this, okay, saying that he's not going to explain what's abstract thinking, as if the beautiful world doesn't know what it is, or that the beautiful world needs an explanation to know what it is. So explaining it would only be wasting the beautiful world's time. So, and second, he also states that he is not going to try to reconcile the beautiful world with abstraction. Nor is it my intent to try craftily to reconcile the beautiful world with thinking or with the abstract, as if under the semblance of small talk, thinking and the abstract were to be put over till in the end they had found their way into society incognito without having aroused any disgust. So here Hegel is saying that I'm not going to pull a wicked trick on you and manipulate you through my speech to make you accept abstractions. As we pointed out, the beautiful world is smart and virtuous, and so would not only be insulting its intelligence with explanation, but also would be committing an immoral act by using language tricks to make them accept abstraction without them recognizing that they've been accepting abstractions all along. So in other words, Hegel isn't going to smuggle abstractions into the beautiful world by disguising them, like the hippie son isn't going to try to convince his dad that a bohemian life is actually good, is actually a concrete life, and so the father would be listening, taking him seriously, investing his time, but only to discover that at the end the father was right all along, that the son is just trying to disguise his abstraction, his abstract way of life. So that would be humiliating. It would be a humiliation that the beautiful world doesn't deserve, and it's not even worth because what does the hippie son has to gain with fooling his father, right? He may have gained some admiration from his father for a certain time, but that admiration faded once the truth was revealed. And so the common opinion thinks similarly about philosophers. when we give philosophers a chance to express their argument, they can mesmerize us for a while, show us their tricks with words like magicians do with a deck of cards, but there's only a limit to fooling an audience. You either try to keep the show going on forever, or you just reveal that all along the magic wasn't real. And so eventually the audience recognizes the abstraction that the philosopher was conveying with complex terminology and argumentation, and so the whole masquerade is revealed. As Hegel writes, such scenes of recognition, which are meant to instruct the word against its will, have the inexcusable fault that they simultaneously humiliate and the wire polar tries with his artifice to gain a little fame, but this humiliation and this vanity destroy the effect, for they push away again and again an instruction gained at such a price. So Hegel goes further with his irony, since he says that going through an entire long essay in which the philosopher tries so hard not to give away that he's been talking about metaphysics all along, an essay that from the start uses the terms of abstraction and metaphysics would lose all of its appeal from the beginning. And so he says that instead, if Hegel wanted to fool the audience, he should have kept those words, abstractions and metaphysics, for the end of his essay, and not use them in the title or in the second sentence of his essay. Like Hegel is saying, look, if I really wanted to fool you, if I really was the wicked person that you think I am, then I wouldn't have used, words like abstraction and metaphysics from the beginning, from the start of my essay. I would have lured you in and then reveal at the end that I was talking about metaphysics and abstractions. So you can read this essay while being sure that it is going to comfort you in your already preconceived notions and opinions. Okay, so. But you can see how this is also a way for Hegel to capture the attention of the audience. It's like you have to write philosophy like a lure or a bait and reveal that you've been talking about philosophy all along, only at the end. So after all, abstract thinking can also be entertaining and worthy of respect. People can tell you that philosophy is worthless and useless, but they can also see it as a noble activity. Like I encounter both discourses on a daily basis, from people saying that it is completely useless to people saying that it is very noble, to indulge in philosophy. Like someone who can think about abstraction is also viewed as someone who has a whole other level of grasping concepts. Like someone who is versed in mathematical equations, which for many complex equations, none of them can be used in physics or in our lives, yet we entertain them. And it seems that people who are good at math always attract respect and attention, even though most of their equations will never be used for anything concrete. Likewise, someone who can read and understand easily a difficult philosophical text can be seen as someone who is smart and attractive. So many told me that they admire my ability, for example, to understand philosophical books. And when someone asks me to explain a philosophical concept, they often tell me to take into consideration their small brain. I mean, that's how they put it. Like for example, I have friends, for example, when they ask me about the philosophical concept, they always have this humbling behavior of presenting themselves as people who have who are ignorant, and so I have to take that into consideration. So being versed in philosophy can be seen as something as something noble. But both parties avoid philosophy altogether. As Hegel says, still, at least deep down, it has a certain respect for it refers to the beautiful world. It has a certain respect for abstract thinking as something exalted, and it looks the other way, not because it seems too lowly, but because it appears too exalted, not because it seems too mean, but rather too noble, or conversely, because it seems as espèce, something special. So an audience can run away, not because what you are saying is an abstraction in the sense that it is completely useless and irrelevant. They can also run away because it is just too noble for them, if you want, too noble that being invested in it won't be worth perhaps the solitude that can come with it. Like the nobler something is, the lonelier it can be, since only a few people will engage with it, and those few people will seem odd to the rest of the population. So even if you have the best ideas of all the best of all ideas, for example, if you are just a few people aware of it, that idea won't serve any purpose, and you'll just be miserable because you'll be cut off from the rest of the good society who knows how to be humble, right? The good society knows humility, and so because of that, the good society seeks the well-being of people, and our well-being depends first and foremost on our sociability. It's like it's great that some people are thinking, to those extents, but what matters to me are the subjects that have an impact or significance on my social circles, because, well, I depend on society. So if my society isn't ready for the abstraction of the philosopher, no matter how true or noble it may be, applying it without the means to apply it will be a catastrophe. So all that I gain in that scenario is just exclusion, right? I'll just be looked at like those weird, crazy, eccentric people that at the end only come off as ridiculous to the eyes of their social peers. And Hegel is aware of this. Quote, "It, abstraction, seems something that does not lend abstraction seems something that does not lend one distinction in general society, like new clothes, but rather something that excludes one from society or makes one ridiculous in it." So, even though the abstraction being smuggled can be indeed like mind-blowing, it won't be of any use for the common opinion. And as Hegel says, the audience already knows what abstractions are and have no interest in them. It's just like it is like a very bad plot twist at the end. That's what abstractions are. So he compares this attitude with a play. Like, imagine you're watching a comedy and you have the cabinet member who is hiding something behind their overcoat, and the audience is following the action because they want to see what has been hidden behind that overcoat all along. What flashing wisdom, as Hegel puts it, was hidden all along, and they were expecting something that is going to be worthwhile, right? That's something that is going to blow their mind in the right way, but at the end, they discover that it was just an abstraction, something that can, be entertaining, but ultimately it won't serve any purpose for this. For the society. Quote, "The unbuttoning of the metaphysical overcoat would be less effective, to be sure, than the unbuttoning of the ministers. It would bring to light no more than a couple of words, and the best part of the joke ought to be that it is shown that society has long been in possession of the matter itself, so what they would gain in the end would be the mere name, while the minister's star signifies something real, a bag of money." So here, Hegel compares the metaphysical overcoat of the cabinet member, he compares it to the overcoat of the ministers. The former turns out to be hiding just abstractions, so something that everyone already knows what it is, and everyone has good reason not to want it, while the other the overcoat of the minister is hiding what the common opinion wants, what the common opinion considers real, which is a bag of money. And so the choice is revealing here, as what makes the word for the common opinion go round is, well, money. It is materialistic values, and that's what makes, you know, the word go round. Therefore, profit is the concrete, while the things we cannot capitalize on are called abstractions. So Hegel paints a sarcastic picture of good society. He praises it for being aware of abstractions, that it doesn't need any explanation, and it is living in the real world, while the philosopher, because philosophers, our priority isn't really money, isn't really profit, well, then we live in abstractions. Quote, that everybody present should know what thinking is, and what is abstract is presupposed in good society, and we certainly are in good society. So of course we are in the presence of good society. Of course the good society knows what thinking means and what abstraction means. Who are we to challenge the common opinion? We puny philosophers who went to philosophy only because we have no sense of accomplishment in our lives. We who are self-absorbed, we who are narcissistic, egoistic, dictatorial, who want to impose our abstract views on the world, on the beautiful world, who are we indeed to bother the good society with such easy and lowly task as to think about abstractions, you know? So this is what Hegel is saying. Quote, good society does not think abstractly because it is too easy, because it is too lowly, not referring to the external status, not from an empty affection of nobility that would place itself above that of which is not capable, but on account of the inward inferiority of the matter. Now at this point, anyone can see the sarcasm of Hegel. I mean, the good society is too smart not to notice that Hegel is being sarcastic and satirical at this point. And he too anticipates that some of his readers will notice that his praise is ironic, and they can put down, you know, the essay angrily. But Hegel reminds them that, you know, the public opinion often reads the newspaper, and the newspaper is often filled with satire and sarcasm and irony. So why throw away the essay just because the satire and irony can be directed at the public opinion? So surely the good society, the beautiful world, cannot be a hypocrite, right? So we should give a chance to Hegel to make his case and read his essay. Quote, the prejudice and respect for abstract thinking are so great that sensitive nostrils will begin to smell some satire or irony at this point. But since they read the morning paper, they know that there is a prize to be had for satires, and that I should therefore sooner earn it by competing for it than give up here without further ado. So Hegel moves on to his next step, which is stating what he's actually going to do with his essay. He explains that I'm not here to tell you what is an abstraction, because obviously you're smart enough to know on your own. I'm not going to fool you into thinking that I am talking about something else while I am actually talking about abstractions. Nor am I going to demand that we deal with difficult or nobler things. I have, like he says that something like, I have no right to demand that of you. I have no right also to make you feel guilty for not wanting to engage in these nobler mental activities. Quote, the intent, as already mentioned, is not to reconcile society with these things, to expect it to deal with something difficult, to appeal to its conscience, not frivolously to neglect such a matter that benefits the rank and status of beings gifted with reason. So this is sarcasm to its highest, of course. It is like saying, you have the right to disagree with me, I cannot force you to be right. And as he points, his real intention isn't to reconcile society with abstraction, but to, quote, reconcile the beautiful world with itself. although he does not seem to have a bad conscience about this neglect. So again, he's claiming that his aim is to be beneficial for the beautiful world who has already figured out, but seems to be lacking a few things so that it becomes unified with itself. Like, all right, beautiful world, you know everything about abstract thinking. I have nothing to teach you on that point, but you don't seem to be applying it fully, right? But hey, it's cool. You don't seem to be bothered by that neglect. So instead, I'm here for something else. Okay, I'm here to help you be, whole with yourself, if of course you want. But I will just give you the tools to do so, and then you do whatever you want with those tools. And so he's not going to be teaching us what is abstraction. He's not going to be talking about metaphysics or anything like that, but rather he is going to do something else. Quote, "The question is merely who thinks abstractly." Who thinks abstractly? Well, the uneducated, not the educated. So what he's saying is that I'm going to allow you to have the tools to recognize who thinks abstractly. And the first criteria is, well, it is those who are uneducated who are going to be thinking abstractly. So of course, the educated are the good society. Certainly they recognize themselves, the German elite, who knows best. But what educated and uneducated mean here? Well, obviously Hegel isn't talking about philosophical knowledge. He's not talking about who knows metaphysics. He's not talking about people who just know things. Rather, Hegel goes to the most concrete sphere of existence. He goes to everyday life. For Hegel, it's not in universities or in high government officials or high government offices or in big companies that you will find the educated people, but rather you will find them on the things in which everyone should be able to display their education. So he's meeting the public opinion on its own terms, right? Like nothing exalted, nothing fancy, no arrogant display of knowledge, none of that. We'll just see who thinks abstractly when we go to the public space, when we go to the public place. So when we said with Heidegger that it is the common man who thinks abstractly, and that's from our first video on this text, Hegel doesn't really have in mind the word common as low in social status. Sure, at that time the lower classes have more chances to be seen as common in the sense of being uneducated, but Hegel is going to show how uneducated people, common people, and abstract thinking is pervasive in all social positions. So going to the everyday to look for abstract thinking doesn't mean we're targeting working class people, but rather it is in our interactions with others that we can distinguish the educated from the uneducated. So Hegel gives a criterion for concrete thinking. It is best determined in how we treat other people. We can't get more concrete than that, right? You cannot get more concrete than how are you treating other people. So since the common opinion doesn't want to be cut off from society, and the common opinion claims that it is not thinking abstractly, then all we have to do is look at how the common opinion, the common opinion is acting out in society, and assess if its behavior is indeed compatible with concrete thinking or with abstract thinking. So from here on, Hegel is going to give a series of examples of interactions within the public sphere and analyze each one to determine if this is abstract or concrete thinking. And these are, and he gives three main examples. One that is about religious authority, the second is about old age, and the last one is about social status. And in each one of these examples, Hegel is going to show how no one throughout the social spectrum is safe from abstract thinking. So let's start with the first example. The first one is about a murderer being led to the gallows. It's a public execution. Among the public, there is a priest, who Hegel calls mockingly someone who knows the bottom of things and the hearts of men. And this means that the priest should be thinking differently from the common populace. Like he should know better about human behavior and human nature than the rest of the lower classes, right? And as you can guess where this is going, well, the religious authority is going to fail miserably at distinguishing himself from the masses and just sees the murderer in the same way as any other member of the common public. So the priest looks at the murderer through an abstraction, which is the most ironic thing ever, because religion is supposed to be the thing that sets you on the path of concrete thinking. So let's take a look at the text. A murderer is being led to the place of execution for the common populace. He is nothing but a murderer. So this is where normally we should have the contrast between the populace and the priest, because seeing the murderer as nothing more than a murderer is an abstraction. Okay, it's abstract thinking. How? Well, here's how we know that seeing the murderer as nothing else but a murderer is an abstraction. Quote, ladies perhaps remark that he is strong, handsome, interesting man. The populace finds this remark terrible. What? A murderer handsome? How can one think so wickedly and call a murderer handsome? No doubt you yourselves are something not much better. This is the corruption of morals that is prevalent in the upper classes, a priest may add, knowing the bottom of things and human hearts. So a few women look at the murderer and see that he is handsome and can be an interesting man, and those are positive traits, right? Well, problem is all the rest of the common population resent these women for thinking that way. The murderer for them cannot be anything else but a murderer. We shouldn't see that he has other traits beside those ones, beside that one, like just murder, or we cannot see other traits that can, present him in a better light. Okay, like if we are going to add other traits than the murderer, we should add traits that highlight even more that he is nothing but a murderer. So whomever thinks that the murderer is not just a murderer, but he can exhibit other traits that remind the people watching him being led to the execution that the murderer can still be worthy of respect. Any person who sees the murderer as more than just that must be as wicked and wretched as the murderer. And so, in other words, sympathizing with the murderer is a sign of our own moral degradation. So when we look at someone who committed a heinous crime, if we still can consider that whatever they did doesn't rob them of their humanity or dignity as human beings, then we suddenly become an accomplice of the act. So basically it means that you sympathize with a murderer, you are no better than a murderer. So in sociology, we call this a moral panic. It's a concept that was developed in the 60s and 70s by sociologist Stanley Cohen. You can check his book written in 1972 called The Folk Devils and the Moral Panic. It's when people suddenly get paranoid that their society is crumbling because of moral corruption. That people are no longer holding on to moral values or moral behavior, and that's why things look so bad around them. So when people are experiencing a moral panic, often their fear and resentment will be canalized by what in sociology we call a moral entrepreneur. It's a term coined by another sociologist, Howard Becker, in 1963 in a book called Outsiders. It is a moral entrepreneur is someone who basically makes rules for the protection of morality, but he sees that the evil is so profound that no number of rules is going to be enough. He's like some sort of crusader reformer. This is how Becker identifies identifies them. To quote from Becker's book, he is interested, this is about the moral entrepreneur, he is interested in the content of rules. The existing rules do not satisfy him because there is some evil which profoundly disturbs him. He feels that nothing can be right in the world until rules are made to correct it. He operates with an absolute ethic. What he sees is truly and totally evil with no qualification. Any means is justified to do away with it. The crusader is fervent and righteous, often self-righteous. And so the priest plays the role of the moral entrepreneur here, that he is going to provide a scapegoat to explain the decadence in moral sentiment. What we are seeing is the corruption of morals in the elite. And although we can agree that he is right about his judgment, that the upper classes are not a model for morality or ethics, still he is wrong for three reasons. The first one is that the upper class are also using the same rhetoric as he is. After all, the same rhetoric that the priest is displaying here, the upper class also has been using it against lower classes. The working classes were often seen as irrational, immoral, stupid by the elite. So whenever a union is formed, for example, it has to be violently put down. When black people were set free from slavery, campaigns were made to demonize them as savage animals who cannot control their urges. And if white women were to have intercourse with them, that's a sign of moral corruption within, the pure and superior race. And even more so, the liberation of slaves, for example, was often deemed the consequence of the corruption of the elite. Same thing with women. Women were seen as evil seducers who can corrupt the morals of otherwise virtuous men, either by their looks or because they are performing witchcraft, which weakens the moral strength of men, and as a result, they do bad things. The men do bad things, and that angers God, and so He sends the plague to punish the men who are now the sinners. And so, how would you remedy this? Well, you organize a witch hunt. Homosexuality and transgenderism were viewed as evil and immoral, as something that rejects the traditions and values that held society together, and they're coming for your kids, like as we often hear. So it is like the LGBTQ activists are really trying to transform your society from its core. They go to the children to condition them or to brainwash them, like that's the usual rhetoric of a moral panic. And secondly, blaming the upper class is often a criticism that is directed to the lower class. Like during the 1920s and 30s, in the American South, as I just said, black people were lynched by normal people who blamed the situation on the upper classes, who betrayed the true values of the Bible and the true values of America, and have unleashed the slaves on the honest, hard-working white men. So the racists who tortured countless black people were feeling like the elite abandoned them to privileged people they didn't even consider as people a couple of years ago. And so in the same way, the anti-trans propaganda that we hear all the time is firstly framed as blaming the elite, the corrupt politicians and the Hollywood filmmakers for being degenerates, and now because of that our children are in danger to be brainwashed by these crazy people who don't understand basic biology. So just because you're blaming the moral corruption of the elite doesn't mean that those who will get hurt the most won't be the most vulnerable people. So fuck the elite, fuck the rich men north of Richmond, but that doesn't mean that we won't throw vulnerable scapegoats in the hunting mix. So blaming the elites can also sometimes be an excuse not to sympathize with the murderer and see his humanity. And thirdly, the priest is wrong because he is using his speech in ways to prevent anyone to sympathize with the murderer or to see other traits in him besides the one that because because a woman who thinks that a murderer is handsome means that it is a gateway to murder will be allowed and people will become indifferent to it. Okay. In short, moral panics prevent people from understanding the situation to see, the social causes and mechanisms at work here. So normally the priest should know these things since he claims to be expert on the things of, of the heart. So in contrast, someone who really knows those things has a different look on the situation. As Hegel says, one who knows men traces the development of the criminal's mind. He finds in his history, in his education, a bad family relation between his father and mother, some tremendous harshness after this human being had done some minor wrong, so he became embittered against the social order, a first reaction to this that in effect expelled him and henceforth did not make it possible for him to preserve himself except through crime. So here here we have a closer example to critical thinking like we described it last time. Because as we've explained, criticism means that you reveal the things that were hidden. You bring forth the things that the abstraction was blocking our view to see. The priest and the common people, take the trait murder as something, they take that trait as everything there is to know about the murderer, and so the trait becomes like a shadow that hides the other facts about his life, which can explain why he did what he did. So basically Hegel is saying that others, unlike the priest, would look at the past life of the murderer, his history, his education, his family, and how people were also reacted to him when he committed minor wrongdoings. If whenever someone does something bad, instead of trying to understand what's going on in there, you just respond with guilt tripping and undeserved harshness and out of proportion punishment. For example, the individual is just going to grow even more bitter, bitter, and reject even the social order, an order that maybe isn't that much ordered in the first place. Let's give an example with the AIDS epidemic of the 80s. So many conservatives and homophobic personalities blame the AIDS epidemic on the sexual behavior of gay people instead of the stigmas around them. If you live in a society that rejects altogether your sexuality, that denies you rights that it gives to everyone else, you will have a hard time being open about your sexuality. And so this will lead to you always trying to keep a low key with your sexual relationships, which means that you won't have much access to medical facilities to protect yourself from STDs, for example. Or it will lead to some psychological trauma that can lead to drug overuse. And so conservatives back then would look at the high rates of STDs and drug overuse in homosexual communities and see it as a proof that homosexuality is bad for you and for society. Like today we hear about transgender suicide. Like, look, transgenderism leads to suicide, like homosexuality leads to AIDS and it leads to drugs. We hear that instead of the stigmas and the social order that is leading those people into committing those actions. If, for example, someone is destroying themselves through drugs because the social order is biased against them and doesn't offer them support and care, failing to rectify the social order only makes things worse. But if you want to solve the problem, preventing people to understand others, seeing in them more than just the one trait that scares the shit out of you, that's not the way to go. And that's what abstractions do. They veil from us the realities behind people's actions, and so we fail to understand them. When people, like actual experts, want to understand the act of the murderer, the priest see a danger to morals. Okay, so the experts want to see why the murderer committed that act, what are the social causes that led to that outcome. So whereas the experts are looking for that, the priest only sees a danger to morality. And so in opposition, we can go back, we can mention Spinoza. Spinoza famously says in his political treatise, for example, I have labored carefully not to mock, lament, or execrate human actions, but to understand them. And to this end, I have looked upon passions such as love, hatred, anger, envy, ambition, pity, and the other perturbations of the mind, not in the light of vices of human nature, but as properties, by means of which we endeavor to understand their nature, and the mind has just as much pleasure in viewing them aright as in knowing such things as flatter the senses. Sorry. So Hegel, like we explained, was a big fan of Spinoza. Like all the German idealists, as we said, were Spinozists. I mean, in the sense of pantheists. As we said, German idealism is based on Spinozism, and Hegel himself, he said, this is from his lectures on the history of philosophy. He said that you either are a Spinozist or you're not a philosopher at all. But that's because being a Spinozist means that you go look for the real reasons behind phenomena, and you won't rely on the simplest explanation, like it's a lack of will or morality. Spinoza, as he said, wasn't looking to explain things in the light of the vices of human nature, but as the properties of those things. Now, of course, I'm not saying that being black or being gay is like murder, okay? Like it is immoral, it's as bad, but we must try to understand. We must see where people are coming from, and that despite being gay, they're still human beings, right? Like, if you hear someone say that, that's probably someone who is still stuck in early 20th century psychology. Like we're no longer killing homosexuals, but because now we understand why the gays are gays. It's because of a deviance in their Oedipal complex, and we can cure them by taking away half of their brains. So that too is an abstraction. That too is abstract thinking. No one is homosexual or transgender because something is wrong in their brain, or because they have some tragic family history. What we're concerned with is the refusal to see someone's humanity after that person commits something bad. In the case of race or gender, the abstraction occurs when someone does something bad, like if a poor black man, for example, steals something, or if a transgender activist would vandalize a shop, for example, or if they are taking drugs to destroy themselves. That's what we mean by they are doing something bad, and you reduce their race or gender to that one trait, like we said earlier with the example of drug overuse, that it is the homosexuality itself that is leading to drug overuse. Well, that's a abstraction, and that's not what you should be that's not what you should do at all. Okay, this is not what we mean by understand where they are coming from. Like a lesbian who is a junkie, for example, and so she steals money from her friends or family to buy drugs, and instead of understanding that social stigma against homosexuality that leads to that behavior, you say that it's their homosexuality that is making her a junkie. So just to clarify things out. But to go back to the priest, he doesn't want any of that. Okay, he doesn't want people trying to understand what makes the murderer commit murders, and therefore he will appeal to morality, how the morals are being corrupted, and it is morally apprehensible to excuse a murderer, as if understanding means excusing an act or banalizing its gravity. So of course anyone who wants to understand the murderer will become reluctant, because no one wants to be accused of being immoral, and so the problem persists. As Hegel says, whenever someone tries to explain the behavior of the murderer, they will be seen as someone who excuses the murder. Quote, There may be people who will say that when they hear such things, he wants to excuse this murder. After all, I remember how in my youth I heard a mayor lament that writers of books were going too far and sought to extirpate Christianity and righteousness altogether. Somebody had written a defense of suicide, terrible, really too terrible. Further questions revealed that the suffering of young Werther were meant. So, The Suffering of Young Werther is a novel by the German novelist Goethe. It's about this guy Werther who falls in love with a woman, Charlotte. Problem is that Charlotte is married. He's married, and because he couldn't marry her, well, he killed himself. The novel was censored and condemned because it glorifies suicide and it can corrupt the morals of people. Like the novel was about, the deep psychology of Werther and the kind of suffering that can come with romantic love. For example, the pressure that it puts on individuals. In the same way as Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert showed how the social organization of the 19th century France can take away any feeling of meaning and joy out of someone's life. And how people would go look for fantasies in which they can escape the boredom of their mundane existence. Like Emma Bovary, that's the name of the protagonist. She grew up reading romantic novels and constructed a false idea of what love should be. And as she grows up and gets married to Charles, a doctor with whom she's bored to death, she starts cheating on him with two other guys who seem to promise her the kind of life that society itself is promoting. Like Emma is living a double bind. Since society is gratifying luxury, but at the same time, Emma has to be with just one guy who, if he doesn't bring to her the luxury that bourgeois society promises anyone, if they are willing to work hard, then her life won't have any meaning. So in the end, she kills herself by drinking arsenic, and the novel was censored, just like Goethe's, for the same reasons, that it is immoral, and it promotes immoral behavior. But it is those novels that shed a light on the social order that was pushing people into immoral behavior, or turning perfectly fine and even moral behavior into immoral ones. So we still have that today in movies, where you have a cast where an actor said something problematic a few years ago, and the whole movie must be banned. Or when you have movies in which there is nudity or drugs or some things that are inappropriate, like for example the series Euphoria. The series Euphoria is amazing when it comes to visuals and cinematography and even performers, but because it is about drugs and mental illness, some people wanted it off the air because it romanticizes mental illness and drug addiction, and so in other words, that's what Hegel means by abstract thinking, that you see only one aspect and that's it. You judge, everything has to be judged from just one angle, and whomever doesn't agree that it is highly problematic must be making a pact with the devil or something. If you don't agree that Euphoria should be cancelled because it's a glorification or romanticization of mental illness and of addiction, then you are as bad as the people who are producing it. You are making a pact with the devil. So this is abstract thinking, to see nothing in the murderer except the abstract fact that he is a murderer, and to annul all other human essence in him with this simple quality. So people just want to they only wanted the murderer to be seen as nothing else, just as a murderer. Now, in order for us not to become like the priest, we too have to ask why would the priest persist in abstraction? Because if at the end we conclude that those who think abstractly are the ones who are immoral without looking at why abstract thinking is so pervasive, then would be the ones thinking abstractly here. Well, like we said in the first video, dialectical reasoning isn't easy because it often can imply that we have to overcome some very difficult to reconcile dilemmas, like determinism and free will, which is the whole dilemma that German idealism was wrestling with. It isn't easy to do. It's not easy to reconcile those two options. And yes, in the case of philosophical concepts, that difficulty can be just logical or intellectually difficult. But when it comes to things that feel too concrete, in the sense that we feel too close to them, like they're involving us in. They're involving us right here and now, the difficulty takes a whole new challenge, right? Like if philosophical concepts can be seen remote and therefore harmless, like we can play with them safely, whether it is determinism or free will. Most people can think about those concepts without feeling that it is going to have a big impact on their lives. So it feels like it is okay if I have trouble sorting that out. But when it comes to murder, when it comes to actual people's lives, well, that's different. The difficulty takes a whole other dimension. Like I can compute that reality is complicated, that it cannot be reduced to either determinism or free will, and it's even complicated to the point of seeing that those two are almost impossible to reconcile, and I can be okay with that. But when it comes to the complexity of human beings, this complexity becomes, can be pretty harmful. So to compute that a murder can be more than just a murder, well, that sort of complexity, to realize that you can have positive feelings towards a murder, makes it more difficult and maybe dangerous to deal with him and to deal with what he did. Okay, so there is an uncanniness there. There's the uncanniness that the murder can reveal about what it means to be human and what it can mean about me. Like if I come to see a murder in a positive light, what does it mean about me? What would it say about me if I can see that a murderer can still be handsome, can still be interesting? So the complexity of humans that can make them unpredictable and difficult to categorize is common among people who suddenly discover that their parents did something horrible in the past, and now they have to reconcile that with a positive image that they've been entertaining so far of that parent. So the priest himself is so scared of this reality that people can be evil and yet still be entitled to dignity. This is too much for him, if you want, because he cannot conceive that he too can have that same evil within him, that he too can has that seed of evil within him too, like any other human being, and understand why that evil would manifest itself one way or another. Okay, the murderer can reveal something very troubling about his nature, and so it is to protect himself from the potential danger of being associated with the act of murdering that he places himself as the authority to judge his fate, and whomever challenges his expertise will be seen as someone who does the unthinkable, excuse a murder. So, like we said, German idealists were interested in the issue of evil. As we seen with Schelling, evil is also part of the world and of our humanity, and therefore it cannot be cut off from it. Okay, evil cannot be cut off from our humanity. So Hegel laments this because he believes this is not what religion is for. Religion is not here to tell you that you can cut evil off like the priest is doing. Because if evil is not cut off from humanity, it means that even I don't know how, even I can do that. You know, if I had a different life, or if, you know, something happens in my life that would lead me to also commit a murder, I cannot accept that. I cannot accept that I have the possibility of me too committing a murder, of me too committing an act of evil, and so I have to prevent anyone to see, you know, that it is possible to have something good about yourself when you commit an atrocity, a horrible act. Okay, and as we said, you know, Hegel laments this kind of thinking because that's not what religion is supposed to do. Religion is to foster compassion and understanding for people when evil takes over. It is precisely in the moment in which it is the hardest to see our humanity that religion should step in and protect the dignity of those who were hurt by the evil, but even the wrongdoers themselves. This means to go beyond one-sidedness and into dialectical thinking. So when religion becomes a tool to reinforce an abstraction, then something clearly went wrong. Religion itself became an abstraction, and Hegel sees this happening when people just believe without any concrete thinking about their belief. That when they partake in the rituals or the holidays without considering their significance or how they ought to look at other human beings in their totality. Some people can claim to do that, but they just flip the whole process upside down. He gives the following example. It is quite different in refined sentimental circles in Leipzig. There they stood a bond flowers on the wheel and on the criminal who was tied to it. But this again is the opposite abstraction. The Christians may indeed trifle with Rosicrucianism and, or rather, cross-rosism and wreath roses around the cross. The cross is the gallows and wheel that have long been hollowed. It has lost its one-sided significance of being the instrument of dishonorable punishment, and on the contrary suggests the notion of the highest pain and the deepest rejection together with the most joyous rapture and divine honor. The wheel in Leipzig, on the other hand, wreathed in violets and poppies, is a reconciliation à la Kotzebue. I think that's Kotzebue, I think that's how it is pronounced, a kind of slovenly sociability between sentimentality and badness. Okay, so a few things that we have to explain in this passage. So first, Rosicrucianism is a Christian order that began in the 17th century, and it has a symbol of a rose and a cross at its center, which was meant to go beyond the idea that the cross is just, you know, an unbearable pain and nothing more, but but that those who suffer the most and still bear the heaviest burden are still worthy of God's grace. Okay, that's what the symbol is meant. Like the cross usually means that it is, you know, a burden that you have to bear. I'm bearing the cross means I'm bearing the burden, but the symbol of that Christian order links the cross with a rose to mean that, you know, just because you are suffering this much doesn't mean that you are unworthy of God's grace. Okay, so here Hegel sees that in this case religion becomes a reconciliation of things that are hard to reconcile. Okay, the rose symbolizes the fact that those who suffered, who bore their cross, are still beautiful, are still handsome, strong and interesting, and therefore their suffering or their evil deeds don't overthrow or don't overshadow their goodness, and it can actually be reconciled together. It may take God to do that for the people unversed in dialectics, but that's the idea. But in the town of Leipzig, Hegel sees that the people simply put flowers on the torture wheel, mostly out of custom and habit, without an actual reconciliation or recognition of the pain and the divine honor that go together. So if a practice simply becomes a matter of custom, it can become just hollow and becomes more about sustaining a tradition that no one gets, or to sustain an image or a spectacle, but when it comes to apply it with how we treat each other, no one is there. Like, in other words, people can just be putting flowers, for example, on the place where the murder was executed, but no one would apply dialectical thinking in their everyday life. Like, they would treat everyone else the same way in abstract thinking. So what happened in Leipzig is an abstraction. The meaning of the wheel was emptied of its deep significance, and instead we are left with just something hollow, something empty. In other words, the meaning of the wheel becomes an opinion. It is spread in the minds of many, but it has no substance whatsoever. No one can justify the meaning of the flowers except by, I don't know why we put flowers on the wheel, but that's just how we've been. Doing. Or they can give you the real reason, but without really believing in it, without being convinced of its deeper meaning, or simply give only one side of the meaning, like either by omitting altogether the evil committed by the murderer, or failing to see the synthesis between his evil and his goodness. So this is what Schelling was talking about regarding pantheism. Philosophical concepts can too become an abstraction when they lose their deep meaning and become a bunch of opinions that people have. To quote Heidegger, this time again from his book on Schelling. In Schelling's treatise, pantheism is such a title which can lead us astray to an external treatment of opinions and standpoints, but which means something quite different. The question of being in general is met. So the issue of pantheism, as Heidegger points, was the question of being, to know about ourselves, what we can do, our contradictions, and how to reconcile them and live with them among others in ethical manners. Instead, the philosophy professors of Hegel's time were seen as emptying those concepts of their deep meaning. They simply teach them in the same way as someone repeats a tradition without thinking about its significance and implication in human life. And as such, they themselves cannot grasp the synthetic nature of pantheism, or have to resolve to either determinism or free will without being able to synthesize the two. So philosophy professors, in that sense, are like the priest. They're doing what philosophy and religion is supposed to guard against. So thankfully, Hegel does give us an example of what religion is supposed to do right after he gave this example of the priest. Quote, I once heard a common old woman who worked in a hospital kill the abstraction of the murderer and bring him to life for honor. The severed head had been placed on the scaffold, and the sun was shining. How beautiful, she said, the sun of God's grace shines on a binder's head. You are not worthy of having the sun shine on you, one says to a rascal with whom one is angry. This woman saw that the murderer's head was struck by the sunshine and thus was still worthy of it. She raised it from the punishment of the scaffold into the sunny grace of God, and instead of accomplishing the reconciliation with violence and sentimental vanity, saw him accepted in grace in the higher sun. So notice the contrast. This is a common woman. He's referring to a common woman here, as opposed to the priest, to a religious authority. So the priest is supposed to be the expert on this, right? He is supposed to do what this random common woman working at the hospital did. And so we find the irony again, that just because you hold a certain power, a certain position, doesn't mean that you are safe from abstract thinking. This is something that we insist a lot in dialectics, that just because you know your Kant or you know your Hegel doesn't mean that you are a concrete thinker. Your test isn't the exams you sit for at the university, it isn't your diploma or your doctoral thesis that makes you a concrete thinker, and it is certainly not knowing your Bible or your Quran, but it is the way you treat people. So, sure, knowing a lot of theoretical stuff about dialectics and critical thinking can help, But philosophy is primarily concerned with things that don't require a lot of theoretical knowledge, since that gives no guarantee of concrete thought. Doesn't mean that you have. Doesn't mean that you can, call yourself a critical or concrete thinker to avoid, reading difficult books. But the idea is that, a common person can be more versed in dialectics than the priest. So this common woman sees the grace of God in the beheaded murderer and doesn't think once that he is less than a human, that even in that state he is still worthy of dignity and still has the right to have a sunlight on his face. She acknowledges the complexity of his humanity with its evil nature as well. She doesn't deny that he is evil or that there is evil in this person, and she fully accepts it. She is not scared and doesn't hide behind abstractions. Now, to keep this complexity alive and well, religion needs philosophy so that it doesn't become just a bunch of abstractions, which it often becomes. So to make sure that no abstraction pervades everywhere in people's lives, this is what we want. So it has a sense of awakening to it, meaning that you have to keep seeing things as they are to distinguish between them. You need to distinguish between the evil and the good nature of people. Accepting it doesn't mean that you no longer see the evil, because that would be doing the opposite. That would be the wheel of Leibniz. That people no longer see the suffering symbolized by the cross, but just see the flowers. So the task is actually to be able to see both within the synthesis that results from their reconciliation. So distinguishing between the good and evil within people means to make them both visible while conserving the totality, the unity of these two aspects within the individual. The problem is that sometimes it's not if not every time. Paradoxically, religion does the opposite and keeps you in a state of sleep. That's why Marx called religion the opium of the people. It's because it can work like a drug to put your mind to sleep, and so you can no longer distinguish between good and evil within people, and you end up having to see either one or the other at the same time. Someone can either be good or evil. Okay, someone cannot be good and evil at the same time, either one or the other. And it also means that religion veils the social realities behind our behavior and make us go for the simplest and easiest explanation ever, like we've seen with the priest. Now, moving on to the next example. This one is about an interaction between two women. So there is one old woman and the other is a maid. And the scene is at a marketplace. And it starts like this. "Old woman, your eggs are rotten," the maid says to the market woman. And this is how the market old woman responds. "What?" she replies. "My eggs rotten? You may be rotten. You say that about my eggs? You? Did not lice eat your father on the highways? Didn't your mother run away with the French? And didn't your grandmother die in a public hospital? Let her get a whole shirt instead of that flimsy scarf. We know where she got that scarf and her hats. If it were not for those officers, many wouldn't be decked out like that these days. And if their ladyships paid more attention to their households, many would be in jail right now. Let her mend her holes in her stockings." So the maid tells the old woman that her eggs are rotten, and apparently she took it personally. Now, we understand that the maid is poor, that she has holes in her stockings, and that the old woman kept attacking her on that, just because she said that the eggs that the old woman is selling on the marketplace, selling to people to eat, are rotten. Now, the old lady is making a scene in front of everyone about the maid's life and family. Here she says, that her father has parasites, that her mom is a whore and is a traitor, because this is during the Napoleon Wars. Germany and France were at war at that time. So saying to a poor maiden that her mother took off with the French, that she is a traitor to the nation, isn't the best thing. Isn't the best thing to do. You know, like it's a very loaded accusation. And also she reminds her that her grandmother died in a public hospital. That's where the poor people go to die. And then she goes to insult her clothes, like she has, you know, holes in her stockings, and apparently the maid is wearing a shirt that is probably either torn or dirty, or maybe that doesn't cover all of her body. And the old woman is pointing that out and says that it would be better for her to have a whole shirt instead of, you know, wearing the flimsy scarf and the hats. And so apparently she's accusing the maid of being a prostitute too, like her mother, because the scarf and the hats are suggested to have been given to her by the officers that she's sleeping with, like those you know, are some special clothes that someone like the maid maybe cannot afford. And so that's what is meant by if it weren't for those officers, many would won't be decked out that way. Decked out means that you won't be wearing fancy clothes like those. So she's like, you're having sex with officers and you show off your clothes as if you think we don't know how you got them, where you got them from, and then you dare talk about my eggs being rotten when you are the most rotten person around here. And so she ends with a moral panic, of course, saying that if the ladyships of the officers fucking the maid, which means if the wives of the officers who are having sex with this maid would pay attention to their household, like, you know, a moral woman like her would, then the officers would be in jail where they belong. So she reminds her that she is poor, that she is a prostitute, that her mother ran away, that her grandmother died in horrible conditions, and her father is being devoured by lice. All of that because she said that her eggs are rotten. And yeah, I mean, that's quite judgmental, right? She's quite a judgmental bitch. So this is abstract thinking, because the old woman, as Heidegger says in his book on Schelling, he says that the old woman doesn't even consider the question of whether the eggs are really rotten or not, but only hears the statement rotten as a reproach, and now addresses her answer totally to this reproach. So in other words, the old woman, like the priest, hear just one thing and just lash out based on what they interpret as the word might meant. The ladies say handsome about a murderer, and the priest hears murder is cool, and the old woman hears rotten about the eggs, but hears that she is rotten. And so the only way to shield herself from this trigger is to return it against the maiden, to make it so that the maiden is worse than her in all possible way or aspect, and therefore by making her essentially less than herself, the old woman can pretend that the maid has no legitimacy criticizing her or her eggs. It's like those artists who, when they're criticized, they take offense, they try to take away your legitimacy as a critic by saying that you are just resentful, that you criticize because you cannot make art like I do, like they'll attack you personally, trying to look for anything that can make you below them. Like you dare say that my painting is ugly without even considering that maybe the critic has a good reasons, has a good point, and they can see and they can both agree about those reasons, if they're reasonable or not. But instead, the artist is going to be like, "Who the fuck are you to criticize my art?" If you wear, casual clothes, they'd be like, "Hey, you're just basic. You have no sense of style. You cannot possibly comprehend it." Or if you have eccentric clothes, they'd be like, "You're just a show off, pretending to be different." But it is, just a whole. It is just a facade. You have nothing. You have never produced anything, etc. So it is the same thing here. You dare say that my eggs are rotten? Did you not look at yourself? and she starts attacking her scarf, her clothes, her family, everything. Everything has to be a proof that the maiden, is rotten. To quote Hegel, she thinks abstractly and assumes and subsumes the other woman, scarf, hat, shirt, etc., as well as her fingers and other parts of her and her father and her whole family too, solely under the crime that she has found the eggs rotten. Everything about her is colored through and through by these rotten eggs. So, like in the case of the priest, the old woman doesn't consider what can be going on in the life of the maid, right? Like, well, I mean, she does consider it, but only to prove that the maid is just rotten. Even when she considers what is happening in her life, it's just to further reinforce the abstraction that she is, that she is just rotten, that she is just a bitch, This is the same thing with labeling. When we label someone a certain thing, that label becomes completely pervasive. It is like, an etiquette that sticks to everything that the person touches or has in his life. Like your clothes have the label rotten, your family rotten, everything is rotten, everything about you is a proof that you are rotten. But Hegel finishes this example with yet another comparison, like in the previous one between the priest and the common woman at the hospital. This time it's between the old woman and the officers she mentioned who are fucking the maid. He said that the old woman sees the maid only through the label rotten, while those officers of which the market woman spoke, if, as one may seriously doubt there is anything to that, may have got to see very different things. So not only Hegel is doubting that the accounts are true, like probably the old woman hurt in her ego about her eggs is just making this shit up, but he suggests that even if it is true, the officers saw the maid in a different way. He's suggesting that maybe the officers who were having sex with her may see her with more humane traits than this old woman at the marketplace would ever see in that maid. So the officers here would be thinking more concretely. Maybe they have, respect for the maid. Maybe they understand her life and pain, unlike the old woman who lashes at her. So the officers an officer going to a prostitute can, in the end, turn out to be more ethical than the rotten eggs bitch over here. So next, Hegel gives the third and final example, where he compares how the servants are treated by their masters through the social spectrum. Like he starts by comparing how common men treat their servants as opposed to noble men. He says, to move from the maid to a servant, no servant is worse off than one who works for a man of low class and low income, and he is better off the nobler his master is. The common man again thinks more abstractly. He gives himself noble airs vis-a-vis the servant and relates himself to the other man merely as to a servant. He clings to this one predicate. So in this passage, Hegel claims that the common man, which here he links with the class status, like common men are low class and low income, but again, abstract thinking is prevailing everywhere in society. But there can be good reasons to think that the common man, as low class and low income, can treat his servant badly. Hegel explains why the common man mistreats his servant. It's because he gives himself noble airs vis-a-vis the servant, and because he bases his whole identity in relation to that servant, whom he considers to be nothing more but a servant. The one predicate that the common man clings to here is that the servant is just a servant. So the common man thinks abstractly because his relationship to the servant is solely based on that, on the servant being just a servant. In other words, the common man thinks of himself as better than the servant. And what is ironic about the situation is that both the common man and the servant aren't very far in terms of social status. Being of a low class and low income, both parties are close to each other on those terms, but the common man wants to act as if there is not, as if they are not close to each other, as if there is indeed a gap as wide between them as there is between the common man and nobility, let's say. So, in order for the common man to feel that he has any value, he needs to reduce his servant to just something that does his bidding, right? Like there has to be a lot of resentment going on there for a low class and a low income common man to treat someone else who is more destitute than he is in this way. Now, it can make sense as when your life is difficult and shitty, you grow bitter and resentful. You want to be a hotshot, but you have nothing. You have no skills, nothing to be, that hotshot. So you try to feel that you matter by having power over someone who is even more vulnerable than you are. Like by comparison to the servant, you can have a sense of worth because, well, you're his master. But that, of course, makes comes at the price of abstracting the servant's ability and individuality. Now, Hegel does compare the common man to an aristocrat or a nobleman from Germany, but from France. He doesn't compare the common man to an aristocratic German man, but a noble Frenchman, because Hegel is an admirer of the French, and he doesn't like that. He doesn't like what the Germans are becoming. He was even a supporter of Napoleon, seeing him literally as the soul of the world, as he called Napoleon. And he hoped that the Germans will learn much about about the manners of the French, about how the French treat each other. Now that doesn't really matter for our purposes here, but it is just to explain why he chose a French nobleman as comparison to the common German man. For Hegel, quote, the servant is best off among the French. The nobleman is familiar with his servant, the Frenchman is his friend. When they are alone, the servant does the talking. See Diderot's Jacques et son maître. The master does nothing but take snuff and see what time it is and lets the servant take care of everything else. The nobleman knows that the servant is not merely a servant, but also knows the latest city news, the girls, the harbors, good suggestions. He asks him about these matters, and the servant may say what he knows about these questions. With the French master, the servant may not only do this, he may also broach a subject, have his own opinions, and insist on them. And when the master wants something, it is not done with an order, but he has to argue and convince the servant of his opinion and add a good word to make sure that his opinion retains the upper hand. So, contrary to the common man, the French treat well their servants. Servants and their masters are friends and equals. And so, of course, you can see this as Hegel pointed out to the German people that that your enemy can be better than you are. Just like he was pointing to the priest that a common woman can be better than him in terms of concrete thinking. Hegel can be doing the same thing here for the German. Like he can warn the Germans not to think of themselves, as being the hotshots, if you want. That even the German people can become, victims of abstract thought. So masters trust their servants with their affairs. This is taking to mean that the master doesn't mingle with the servant's business and doesn't boss them around. Even if the servant is technically subordinate to the master, they have autonomy over their work. They have autonomy over their work as servants. Like they are masters of their own work. And so likewise, the servant is also autonomous in thought and is knowledgeable. It is someone the master can enjoy having conversations with about a variety of subjects, like between equals. The master can ask his servants for his opinions and seek his advice, and the servant is free to initiate any conversation with his master, and the master has to take into consideration what the servant has to say and must not give orders but argue in order to convince the servant, and must always be respectful and nice to his servants. So the master doesn't maintain his position of master through abuse but through good words. These, of course, make the servant seen as a full human being with his own interests, his own taste, his own opinions, his own history, and his own autonomy. So we can say that the French nobleman, in Hegel's views, which again, the point here is not to say if it is historically accurate or not. It probably wasn't. No, it definitely wasn't. But the point is, to have comparisons between different people in different spheres of existence that display, critical thinking or concrete thinking, as opposed to the people that, that some would usually take as being better at concrete thought. So the French nobleman is therefore viewed as a critical thinker, since he doesn't reduce the autonomy of the servant. The issue with abstraction is indeed you remove the autonomy of other. The abstraction is imposed on them and they can never break free from it. This is perhaps best exemplified with the last brief example that Hegel mentions. It's about an officer and a soldier. Quote, in the army, we encounter the same difference. Among the Austrians, so the Austrians, that's the Germans, among the Austrians, a soldier may be beaten. He is canaille for whatever has the passive right to be beaten is canaille. Thus, a common soldier is for the officer his abstractum of a beatable subject with whom a gentleman who has a uniform and port d'épée must trouble himself, and that could drive one to make a pact with the devil. So here again we have a contrast between the Austrian, the Germans, how they treat their soldiers. They treat their soldiers like canaille, something less than human, and so makes it okay to beat them. And so the common soldier is just that to the officer, an abstraction, a beatable subject. And so in the case of the French master, the servant isn't seen as an abstraction but as a concrete individual with whom you have to talk like an equal. You can't reduce him to what he is not, unlike the example given in the Austrian army, where the common soldier is just canaille and doesn't have any importance or any autonomy. So in other words, the Austrian officer dehumanizes the common soldier, so his servant. But the gentleman, on the other hand, the gentleman is a French officer. When he says the gentleman who has a uniform and port d'épée, he's talking about the French officers. The gentleman, on the other hand, troubles himself with the common soldier. Means that he engages with what the soldier has to say. And so he does that with the common soldier, even if that makes him do a pact with the devil, or at least make him seen as if he's making a pact with the devil. And that end is relevant here for us, because Hegel seems to suggest that in the eyes of those who think abstractly, if someone considers a servant as an equal and as an autonomous human being, that person would be considered to be an outcast, can be considered someone who makes a pact with the devil. This is a case in which morality can produce the opposite of morality, because if morality means that you shouldn't treat your servants in the ways that the French officers treat their soldiers or their servants, Well, it means that, you know, morality is that morality, you know, becomes immoral, actually, you know. So this is an example of how sometimes people can use morality to justify doing immoral acts, or use morality to criminalize it. They can use morality to criminalize, you know, compassion, to criminalize caring about others, respecting others, because, well, someone who cares about you know, the servants, who gives his servants their autonomy, is de facto seen as someone making a pact with the devil. So basically, abstractions objectify people. They turn them into tools that we can shape however we please. It makes them inoffensive, unable to answer back, unable to say no, unable to argue back, unable to partake in the dialectics. And this is why abstract thinking flees from the dialectics, because dialectics is based on, you know, having contradictions. But in all the examples we've seen of people, you know, making abstractions, it is examples of people taking away the possibility for the other person to respond back, to answer back, to engage in the dialectics. So abstract thinking flees the dialectics because it confronts it with the most difficult questions about ourselves. They can be overwhelming sometimes, and maybe, you know, always overwhelming, but the point of philosophy and the dialectics is to have the courage to face up those questions. And we don't have to do it alone. This is, you know, the beauty of the dialectics and of philosophy. A friend is always invited to partake with us on a dialectical journey. The maid could be the friend to that old woman. The murderer could have been the friend to the priest, and the servant could have been the one of the common man, and the soldier could have been the friend of the officer, just like, you know, Hegel gives us the examples of, you know, the old common woman working at the hospital, or, you know, the officers, or, you know, the French masters. And so this is how we end this text. It is, you know, about always acknowledging the autonomy of other people, in the sense of, you know, always being ready to hear opposing views, and engage in dialectics. Not to always accept, you know, things that are obviously unacceptable, but in order for some things to be deemed unacceptable, they have to partake into the dialectics. It is the dialectics. Okay, the dialectics is not here to just give everyone the right to be entitled to an opinion, and that's it. Like the dialectics is not here to tell you that you can say whatever you want without challenging those opinions. The point of dialectics is to challenge those opinions, because, well, dialectics is also about distinguishing what is right from what is wrong, what is true from what is false. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed these videos on Hegel's text Who Thinks Abstractly. I will soon be talking again with the Black Ponderer. We are going to have another online discussion about critical thinking, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I hope I will see you all there. And yeah.